So this time was really just set up for being able to talk through any questions anybody had around the E-League, which is my mentorship experience, and kind of address things to see if this is for you or if this isn't for you, and for you to be able to make choices based on that. So one of the key reasons that I started the E-League, I started thinking about it very, very strongly at the end of 2016. And I was getting very frustrated by who I believed were incredible women who were not being seen or heard. And it didn't matter how good they were. It didn't matter really, even if their marketing was on point or if they had any kind of training behind the microphone or any of that stuff. People weren't covering these podcasts. That was one thing. Then the election happened in November 2016, and that kind of shook a lot of, I feel, many of our foundations. And I felt that big shake. I didn't know what would be coming in the future. And I started to feel fear, a lot of fear. Maybe also because at that time, in around 2016, it started to revolutionize social media and the public expression of ideas in a way that wasn't there before. There were many elements around the 2016 election where it was the first time a lot of things happened in terms of coverage, in terms of conversations online in both what at that time was Twitter, Instagram for sure. And there was a lot of emotion during that time. Something else happened during that time, I feel, in my life, where there was an upending of past lives of mine or unfinished business with people and things I hadn't dealt internally with myself. This is more on a personal level versus a professional level. And it sparked right around the end of 2016. And then it really got the ball rolling, and it started to burn out of control, not only within me, but in calling to me things that should have been put to rest prior. There was a lot of interaction with people who were not good for me, very toxic for me, and brought back a lot of what I now can look back at and label as PTSD, like a PTSD reaction. My anxiety really went through the roof. I was in a state of panic. And I was sort of forced to deal with all of those feelings. And then to add to the equation, working as an independent contractor, was extraordinarily challenging at that time. And we had been going through a lot of financial challenges. And I ended up with quite an astounding tax bill in early 2017. So all of that culminated into the desire, first of all, to address some professional things or the podcasting things that I had seen overall in the industry. Second of all, to address some internal disconnections that I had felt that I needed to right. The third part was the fact that I didn't at that point have anything that was directly mine, meaning that I was offering other than consulting, because I have been doing consulting for a long time. And yes, I was doing She Podcast at the time as well. And there was an element of She Podcast School for Women and things like that that we had for podcasting. But that was really centering my teachings and my point of view that I had, that I tend to bring forward, right? There was that aspect. And then there was the tax bill of it all. And I thought, how do I solve all these problems all at once? Weirdly, once I spoke with a really amazing, what I consider wise woman healer. And this is for sure. This is not like, I am not talking about what we see on Instagram today. But yeah, anyway, I'll go into that story at another time. I had an amazing one-on-one conversation with her. And after doing that, it clarified a lot of things in my own head. It kind of softened what was going on with me internally. And there was an element of me making a decision that I wasn't going to be carried by this current of the unknown, by this current of fear and panic, which also involved me isolating myself and doubting a lot of the things that were mine, that were me. And I sat down and I remember very specifically, I think I still have this notebook. I opened up a notebook and I started to use sticky notes and wrote down that I needed to make X amount of money. What could I do that isn't going to go against the way that I work, but with the way that I work? And I came up with this experience idea of a collective and yet on your own. And it was this dichotomy that I really wanted to do, which was I'm an introvert at heart. I really do my best work alone, and I really work best one-on-one with people. And I'm not a group coaching person, both as a teacher and as a student. I'm not that. And I wanted to create something that accentuated individuality and introspection and had a component that was of a community, that was interaction, but my way. It was a very selfish way that I crafted this. So what I ended up doing that first time is I emailed a lot of people that I thought were amazing and said, would you like to be part of this experiment that I'm putting together? And this is my idea around it. It was very vague, and I just want you to come along. And I had a few people say yes to me doing that. And I worked my butt off, and I was able to pay my taxes that I needed to do. I did a lot. It was probably the most challenging time in terms of work, but it was so rewarding. I cannot even tell you. I cannot tell you how rewarding it was for me to do that first round of the E-League. And what happened in that first round is that I found the tool called Voxer at that time, Voxer, which is still around. It's kind of a dated sort of tool in the way that it is engaged. But one of the key reasons that we really loved that tool, wait, was that in that first time? I think it might have been the second, but anyway, or maybe it was during. Anyway, all that to say that the best thing about that is that we could continue having conversations, but they were asynchronous. And there was a point where everybody was talking, and it was so exciting to be able to gather everybody's insight, and we didn't have to show up and be there looking at each other. And this was prior to the pandemic, which was another thing that was kind of innovative in the way that the E-League was put together, which was we weren't used to doing a lot of Zoom calls. It wasn't something I wanted to do a Zoom call. It was more of an experiment in audio, and we had to share our voices above being on camera, which was not something any of us at that time were doing. I also realized that it was a really easy way for me to move from the big thoughts that I had out to get that teaching to the community, in the sense that I was also using Voxer broadcasts, which are essentially kind of like having your own private podcast, if you will, but it's a little more asynchronous, and people just listen to what happens all the time inside of this broadcast channel. And then I met Matt one-on-one with a lot of these folks. And what I started to realize is that I was saying the same thing over and over and over again to people that kept working with me. I was like, I'm saying the same things. So every time that I would prepare for one of my one-on-one meetings, I would then copy and paste almost exactly the same thing that I said, not meaning to do that because I didn't want to do anything cookie cutter. I've never done a cookie cutter anything. So I started to realize that I would amend what I was saying to them, but the framework started to develop as I started to talk to individuals about what they were going through. And I thought, that's really interesting. How about I save myself some time and say all these things, because it's obviously lessons that are universal that need to be learned and or thought about. And then I can really just focus on those individual problems, blocks, very specific questions that I had with some of these folks. And I thought that's a good way for me to do that. So the next time that I ran the E-League, I created a podcast. I created a podcast of those things that I kept saying over and over and over again. And it's called the E-League Essentials. And that way, that became actually the framework of the E-League overall. You get these core teachings that are in podcast form. They all tend to be pretty succinct, and they're not long. They're fairly easy to listen to, and they are very universal in nature. They are created in a way, and it actually helps me that they can be redone. These thoughts, these feelings, these ideas can be revisited and amended again for the new thing. And the lessons still stand. I'm kind of like surprised by all of that stuff, because it's not stuff that I sat down and I was like, I want these teachings to come down to me. It was never that. It was more, as I am helping people, the same words kept coming out of my mouth. And I'm like, oh, I'm just repeating myself. So I just thought I should just write these down. And then they became sort of the core teachings, but I never thought of them that way. It was more about being helpful to the other person. And so that became the core of what those teachings are. So how does this whole E-League thing work? I crafted it around 5 weeks. And it has morphed a little bit. Before, it was very much centered on one-on-ones with me, because again, that's how I work best. And then I realized that my capacity to be able to do that and also have, in full disclosure, a full-time job and be a mother of teenagers, it was a little too hard for me to do all that stuff. So in order for me to continue doing the e-league, I kind of distilled what was important and what I found through running the mentorship experience over and over again of what really resonates. And one of them is the community component of it, which is we get to meet people who tend to come to me at a time of transition, a time of this or that. I'm trying to move from this place to that place. Something is transitioning, something is not working, and therefore something else needs to happen. Sometimes it's letting go, sometimes it's starting something new, but it always is a time where you can go, okay, I get an opportunity to think through all of this stuff. The second thing is that we do a lot of asynchronous work. We do engage with the tool Voxer. Like I mentioned before, there is a group chat where everybody gets an opportunity to talk with one another and or voice things that I prompt people to do. And then there are things that happen in the engagement process and during the experience that are on their own. They have nothing to do with me. Folks really make a lot of insights and get through insights in the process of listening to the podcast episodes and with some of the teaching prompts that I come in that I bring to the table. And the way that I bring those in are done via broadcast. There's a broadcast channel, and the broadcast channel is me talking. That's it. Not all the time. I will come in for 5 minutes here. I will come in for 10 minutes there. Sometimes I'll set sort of like a foundational introduction at the beginning of each week. I prompt people to move forward and things like that, all based on what everybody needs. All based on what everybody needs. And so it's very much reflected in whoever applies and what you write down in your application. And if you are accepted into this round, it's all crafted around what those asks are, because it's all about clarity here and guiding you to do that. And thus, you can actually just listen to my broadcasts for 5 weeks without engaging with anybody, and you'll do a lot of wonderful things for yourself. You can also participate and go all out in the chat, the group chat. Great. That's fantastic. That's awesome. I've also had people who just listen to the podcast, and I send a weekly wrap-up email of what happened that week, some high-level teachings. I kind of summarize what I talked about and send that email out. And for some folks, that's the way they do the e-league. They just get my emails, listen to the podcast, and engage with me one-on-one on Voxer. And so we talk. I have added a live component in the sense that there are 2 Zoom calls. One that is a welcome so that everybody gets to see each other. That is something that I heard feedback from the people who were there. They wanted feedback. They wanted more connection. And they told me, what would be helpful doing these Zoom calls. I was like, okay. So we have an intro Zoom call, which is really just welcome, meet each other, the end. And then we go to the last meetup together. Again, it's kind of like a goodbye, talking through the experience, looking through things, what happened, right? Super simple. Again, all of this is opt-in. It's nothing over the head. And then lastly, you do get a debrief sort of exit interview with me where you get a half an hour where we can talk through things that you still need guidance over, things that you still didn't figure out for yourself yet. All of those things. That comes at the end. I have added one bonus thing this year, which is the something that I've called Techo Kaigi, not Techo. Techo is journal. That's what that means in Japanese. But it's podcast Kaigi. And Kaigi means meeting. And it's a meeting with your podcast. And I used to do it in the e-league. I used to do it every week. It was their podcast episodes. And then I would add a component of planning for the next year. There was a lot of planning for the next year that happened. And I decided to remove that aspect of it so that we could deal with other things during each week. And the planning session is all going to happen in one day. And we can all sit down and plan, and I'll go through the entire spiel in one place. Because I also realized that there's a lot of people that could get a lot of benefit from just doing the planning versus doing the entire 5 weeks with me. And there's people that want to do that. So I decided to take that out, but it's still part of the package you get when you do the e-league. But somebody can also just buy the planning part and be off with that part of it. So it's going to be its own sort of offering that I have by itself. So those are the things that you get. And I know it's a little bit vague because there are a lot of things about this experience so let me tell you what it's not. It's not a step-by-step how to do something. So if you're saying, how do I market my podcast? I'm not going to give you a step-by-step of how to do that. How do I grow my show? I'm not going to give you a step-by-step of how to do that. I am going to listen to your show. I'm going to look at your business. I'm going to look at your online footprint. And if you, and another thing that I've opened this up to is that there are some folks that do the e-league that are in podcasting. They're not necessarily podcasters, so they don't possibly have their own show, but they do have their own thing. They are doing their own thing. And that's why the mixture between creators, business owners, leaders, it's more around that. It's the leaders of the experience. It's the leaders in podcasting that I want to nurture because I want you to continue being in the space. All that to say, if you are wondering, how do I get more clients? How do I sell my product? I'm not giving you a step-by-step. This is not a training. This is not a workshop in that realm. This is time where you get somebody's eyes, mine, and maybe some other people's, and you get to really step into why you're doing what you're doing. Where are some pieces that you really need to pay attention to? What are some things that you might have missed on? How do you connect with folks that get you? You get an opportunity to be validated by other people that are in the same boat as you, the same type of person. And I'm not saying that everybody that does the e-league looks the same or is a specific demographic. In fact, they're incredibly diverse, but there's a core element, and most of these folks are very impact driven. They all are deeply creative. They all care deeply about things. They are multi-talented in so many different ways. They are open to doing the work. And they don't want easy answers. They don't want a checklist. So if you are somebody that wants to follow checklists and do and have a pre-made path to replicate what somebody else has done, I am not that person for you. I won't do that. I can share many examples of people's success and what they have done, which might spark something for you. But I will not give you a book to follow. I'm not a how-to person. I am the person that's going to help you not need me. So you come to me when you're stuck so that I can help you help yourself. I'm not a solution to your problem in the sense that hiring me is going to fix it all. Working with me is going to make all your troubles go away. That's not what I do. I come and I am right alongside you to cast light on those parts that maybe you have missed. I'm there to validate and clarify your gifts and what you bring to the table, and to step in to understand and to truly feel how incredible you are, where your talent lies, how you need to move forward, highlighting that thing that makes you you, so that you can continue moving forward and take responsibility for the things that you need to be responsible for. For a lot of folks, what I've seen is that you need somebody to be there while you're crossing the bridge. You need somebody to hold your hand while you're crossing that bridge to stabilize that transition. And in my head, I just saw, those bridges, the ones that are made from like, oh my gosh, what do you call those things? The rope, right? There's rope all across, and you have to keep on holding, and it's precarious to go across that bridge because it keeps shaking. And I remember when my kids were tiny and there were those ropey type bridges that would help them find their body center. They would start off, and at times it is very hard to find whatever that middle it is very hard to find what that middle point is for yourself, right? How do you draw into your core, into that literally in your body, not talking about energetically or, magical, spiritually or anything like that, but literally draw your muscles together to pull yourself together, to make yourself stronger, or to draw in. When you're going through that bridge, it becomes kind of super shaky, and you have to be so full. Like, you start to feel your core muscles engage, your belly, your legs start to draw towards the middle, all of that stuff. But there were times when you're little that doesn't happen. You kind of like are so all over the place. So what I would do is I would tighten that rope. I would pull that rope down a little bit to make the tightness of that rope stabilize just enough so that they could step across that bridge. So I didn't do it for them. I stabilized the rope a little bit so that they could find their center and continue moving forward. That's what I do. I don't particularly sit there and do it for you. I can pull that rope to stabilize the bridge as you're crossing. Because the goal is that you don't need that at some point. You might need more at some times. You might need less at other times. And the goal is for you to be able to cross that bridge on your own and find that center on your own, that strength. That's the key. And that's why you do the E-League. So you do the E-League when you're really shaky and you don't know how to cross that bridge. Or you already know how to cross that bridge. You've got that center, but you just need a reminder. Or you're looking for more. You also do it that way because sometimes it's time to change bridges. It's time to go to a different one. It's time to go a different path. So I hope that answered some questions. But I would love for you, if this kind of resonates with you in any way, please come and do the E-League. I tend to do it once a year now. There's a possibility in 2025 I might do it 2 times a year. It depends on my capacity. It depends on how I'm vibing. I usually have it happen during transitional times. My favorite time to do these is the transition between fall and winter and the transition between spring and summer. Those are my favorites. So if I do it in 2025, it more than likely will be around March. If not, I will be doing it in 2025 in October. Again, early October for 5 weeks. Yeah, I think that those are the only questions that I had. I do have payment plans. If you need a payment plan, you can just click through and you say that you need a payment plan and I will adjust it depending upon what you need. And you can do the E-League as many times as you want. I hope that this is helpful for you. And I will see you in the E-League.